a different video from last year. That's good. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming out on what is a very cold and rainy Sydney day. I think we've lost a few to the weather, but that's understandable. My name's Andrew Godden, the CEO of BMS, and we're delighted to be sponsoring this event with our co-partners, Barry Nilsson Lawyers and the AILA, the Australian Insurance Law Association. There you go, got it. And special thanks to Sarah Tooten. Sarah's the chairperson of the Queensland chapter of the AILA. Is it AILA or just... I can't say that. Okay, very good. Okay, so this event has been running for 10 years. Pretty hard to believe that, really, when I thought about it. But it segues nicely into this year's theme, which is, and I'll get it right because I don't want to get it wrong, the next 10 years, a sustainable future. And a special focus on building resilient futures for this session in particular, fostering mental wellness in a diverse workforce. Okay, so we all know diversity is really important, diversity and inclusion these days. It needs to be embraced, and one of the greatest ways to do that is to make sure you're fully present, asking appropriate questions, but probably most importantly, listening. And then truly listening, being present and focusing. And then when you listen and ask questions, what do you actually do with that information, and do you take positive actions? So it's actually my true pleasure is to welcome our guest speaker today, Kirk Docker, one of Australia's top interviewers and storytellers. Now, I'm a Freo fan, so for those interested in AFL, we'll get the irony of that. That's very exciting. We've only made one grand final in 2013, but Kirk the Docker, welcome. Thanks, Kirk. A lot of you may know him from his very well-known ABC show, You Can't Ask That, 7 seasons. He's the co-producer and director, correct? And he's won many awards for that, and you'll probably see why shortly. His unique approach to asking the tough questions with curiosity and care will guide us on how we can bring this to our own lives at work and beyond. A key message is that every person has a deep desire to be understood, and I think we all get that. So I'm very excited to have him here with us, and welcome, and here's Kirk. Thanks, Kirk.
Over there in the year before they launched and bought all the Dockers merch and thought this is going to be really great, they're going to win heaps of comps, and that's right, they haven't done anything. So, but yeah, my name's Kirk Docker. I'm a television producer and interviewer. I'm rapt to be here today. And look, I'm particularly passionate about the interview and communication. I love it because I'm curious about humans and how they work. And I love challenging my audiences to think differently about people they might judge on the surface. Over the last 20 years of my career, I've had to work out ways to build relationships and communicate with literally every type of person. People of different ages, people of different ethnicities, people who, different religions, people who live with different mental health diagnoses, people who have faced all types of trauma, people who want to be interviewed and people who don't, because sometimes people come across my path that don't necessarily want to be on camera, but they are, and so I have to work out a way to tell their story. Ultimately, I interview these people to understand them and, with their permission, tell their story to a wider audience. So I'm excited to share with you what I've learnt doing this. I created and produced a program called... just paused on me there. Oh, there we go. Called You Can't Ask That. Just out of interest, and I'm aware there's everyone at home too, so hi everyone watching at home. Just out of interest, who knows the program? Oh, awesome, awesome. Look, we're very proud of our show. It's done remarkably well. It's now the most sold television format in Australian history. There's something like 50 seasons of the show around the world in 9 or 10 different languages. We're the 18th most sold format, just to give you an idea. Number 17 is Big Brother. So we're up there. It's all over the place. And one of the reasons I think it's been successful is because of the honesty and the candid nature with which our participants speak on camera. For those of you who don't know the show, how I describe it is it's an interview show where each episode we focus on a misunderstood or marginalised group of Australians. So it could be Muslims, it could be people living with schizophrenia, it could be nudists. All our participants on our show live with a label. And what we're trying to do on the show is go past that label and understand who they truly are. And we do that by asking the questions you shouldn't ask. Maybe you'd like to ask these questions, but the questions are considered too rude, or maybe they're too probing, or maybe you don't have access to this person to ask the question, so we do it on your behalf. All our participants then get to answer those questions however they want. So importantly, the show only features people with lived experience. There's no friends or family or experts speaking on anyone else's behalf. It's just a series of people with a label talking about what it's like to be them. And what's incredible, when you get a whole lot of people with the same label answering the same questions, what we found is they all answer those questions completely differently. You know, just because they have this label doesn't mean they all think the same. So I'd love to show you a little trailer of the show. I'd love to show you a little trailer of the show just to give you a bit of an idea of how the show looks.
How are we starting this?
What did you do to end up in juvie?
How often were you called a faggot in high school?
But you don't look like you've got dementia.
What does a porn set smell like?
Can you read this card?
Is that a joke on models being dumb?
Why do you sound so unsophisticated?
Simple answer, I am fucking unsophisticated.
Like, are you for fucking real?
Dear, oh dear.
Do tell, do tell.
I felt bad that I had failed as a person.
I literally broke.
All I was thinking was, I'm bad.
I hated my life. I hated myself.
And one day you think you've dealt with it all, but then you get asked a question like this, sort of brings it all back.
I do think a lot of people are holding something in.
Together we made a mess of my life.
Sorry.
There's no strength in being silent.
It's normally a story I tell in more intimate settings.
When you share your story a bit more, it's a bit cathartic.
It took a long time to find my sense of self-worth.
You feel like you're complete.
Yeah.
All the pieces have come together.
All the fun things, yeah, the world's so great.
This is my community.
And I'm proud of who I am.
Oh, you're going to mow it, Mum? Cut it off.
No, no one's cutting my mullet off.
So fuck the patriarchy that tells us as women we can only be one bloody thing.
Yeah, I've done some dumb shit and made mistakes, but who doesn't?
Yes.
We're all different, but we're all the same.
On me, what you see is what you get.
You shocked me more than the question.
Yeah, oh yeah, I know.
Christ.
Been doing that for many years.
Oh.
One of the bits of feedback we got about this trailer was that we can't tell who's from what group. And to me, actually, that was a great compliment, because despite all these people, and you could see what episodes they were from, all sorts of things, juvenile detention, postnatal depression, porn stars, despite them, except for maybe the Bogans, they are a little bit more obvious, you can tell who they are. But despite all these people having these labels, really, when you scratch under the surface and you could hear from their answers, they have the same wants and needs as all of us. You know, there's not that much different. I do love pointing out the final two guys. They were from our Gay Men episode, and we deliberately put them together. The younger gentleman, Liam, he's grown up in a time when it was accepted to be gay. His family and his friends and his school accepted him. He wants to have what he describes as a very vanilla lifestyle. One partner, white picket fence, one job, doesn't want to have a big sexual exploits, any of that sort of stuff. Barry, who he sat him next to, very, very different story. He grew up in a time where it was illegal to be gay. His first sexual encounter actually wasn't that far from here in some public toilets. In actual fact, he can name all the public toilets in Sydney as the best places to have sex. And he goes by the name, if you're from Sydney, you might have heard of him, he goes by the name of Trough Man. And he's called Trough Man because he likes to lay in urinals and be pissed on. Anyway, every time he opened his mouth, Liam was like, oh my God, I can't believe the things that are coming out of there. And why I'm telling you this is, here's two gentlemen, the same label, gay man, but their experience couldn't be more different. My job on the show is, I'm the interviewer. I basically think of my role as one where I get to talk to the most interesting people in the country and ask them the most personal, honest, at times gut-wrenching questions about who they are. And then I get to sit there and listen to them. And through doing this literally hundreds and hundreds of times, what's become clear to me, what I've learned through speaking to all these people is that we all share a core want. And that is to be understood, right? We all desire to be understood for who we are. And if you go into your interactions that way, believing the person opposite you wants to be understood, it will change your approach and the questions you ask. So today I want to talk about how to ask better questions to get more interesting answers. Essentially, what I want to do is I want to show you how to interview, the way I do it. Because there's lots of different ways to interview. The way a shock jock does it is very different from the way a sports reporter does it. Each have their own aims and outcomes. I'm going to show you the way that I do it, the way that we do it on this show on You Can't Ask That. So, before we get to how to interview someone, I want to think top level as to why we're interviewing someone. What am I trying to achieve with my interview? What are you trying to achieve with the interactions that you're having in your life? What I'm trying to achieve with my interview is almost the most important question to ask, right, before I get started, because what I'm trying to achieve impacts everything from the types of questions I design to the way I go about it. So there's lots of things I'm trying to achieve on my show on You Can't Ask That, right? So first of all, I'm trying to ask the questions you shouldn't ask. Sounds like an obvious thing to say, but those questions you shouldn't ask are actually take a lot of courage to ask them. So I want to do that, and I want those answers to be honest, truthful. I want them to tell me things they don't normally talk about. The second thing I'm trying to achieve is entertainment. If no one watches my show, it might as well not exist. So I want interesting answers from my participants, not pre-packaged, rehearsed answers, right? I also want it to be a positive experience for my interviewees. Often, a lot of the people I speak to are quite vulnerable. So I don't want them to come in and the experience be something where they walk away feeling worse about their life. So I want it to be a positive experience and hopefully grow from the experience. But the big thing, I suppose, the overarching thing, the biggest aim that I have for my interview is to ask questions to understand this person, right? So ask questions to understand their belief systems, to understand their experiences, to understand the way they think. Because I think if I can understand this person and how they operate, then my audience at home are going to be able to understand them too. So if my aim is to understand them through my question asking, what I'm looking for in their response, in how they respond to me, is I want authenticity. I want an authentic response from them. This word authenticity, authentic expression, it's a bit of a buzzword at the moment. You see many things being described as being authentic, but what does it actually mean? So if I'm interviewing someone and they're expressing authentically, what I'd say first of all is that they're not trying to impress me or second guess what to say, right? They're able to drop this mask, this facade that we carry around all the time, relax and be themselves. And ultimately, they feel comfortable to say anything because they're not going to get judged by me, or they feel like they're not going to be judged by me. It's pretty rare that someone is 100% authentic in an interview I do. Often, people drop in and out, where they're flowing, and other times they'll clam up. And when they clam up, generally, I would say it's because of fear. And there's lots of different fears that might pop up. So people might freak out about saying the wrong thing. They might fear being laughed at with their answer. They might be inauthentic because their fear of looking stupid or being misunderstood, of being unliked, of the consequences. What's going to happen with this information if I give the honest truth? And those fears could be to do with you, the fact that you're their boss, or based on your reputation, or it could be based on their own history when they've opened up previously and it hasn't worked out for them. So this time they're going to be careful what they say, and they are going to give me a version of the truth. And when people fear in these interactions with me or with any of you, right, what they do is they deflect out of danger, and they deflect in lots of different ways, right? So the first way that people deflect is with humour. They might crack a joke rather than saying something real. They might deflect with theory by trying to say something very smart rather than something personal. They might go blank. They might say, I don't know, to something they should know the answer to. They might deflect with half-truths or untruths, try to tell you what they think you want to hear. Or they might deflect with emotion, anger, aggression. Why are you asking me that question? That's inappropriate. So what I'm interested in from you guys is, how do you deflect when you don't want to answer something in your life, when you feel out of your depth or nervous in your own interactions? What's your go-to way to get out of it? For me, I would say my go-to way to get out of if I'm feeling nervous is I might dial up the charisma. I might try and be more charismatic. I might try and fudge my way through with energy. Or I might try and tell a shiny story over here that I know will probably capture their attention. Meanwhile, I'm hiding the real truth over here. So what I want you to do is, just for 1 minute, I want you to turn to the person next to you, and I want you to discuss, how do you deflect when you don't want to answer something in your own life, when you want to get out of it, when you feel out of your depth or nervous? And now, for those at home, if you're on your own, just have a think about it. And if you're with a group of people, turn to someone next to you and talk to them. How do you get out of it if you don't want to answer something? All right, time's up, time's up. So, I'm an interviewer by trade, so look, actually being at the front of the room is not really my comfortable place. I'm behind camera for a reason. So, I am going to ask for a bit of interaction today. So I'd love to hear from a couple of people. How do you deflect when you don't want to answer something in your own life? Who would like to share something with me? What's your go-to method of getting out of it? Yeah, down the front. We're going to bring you a mic only because there's people at home listening. Oh.
Wow.
All right, just talking to that because there's people watching on the camera at home.
Just go wow and laugh and just, okay, not going to answer that, but whatever. Like, just kind of, not really acknowledge it, but just answering that.
Wow, and how does that work? Does it work?
You get people like, oh, come on. Why do you need to know?
And the good thing about that method is, one, is buying you time. Why do you need to know this? What you're trying to get at? Because part of, I think, what we're trying to do, and this is often the case too when someone asks the question back, or how would you answer it? What you're trying to do is buy some time. How honest should I be in this interaction? Do I really feel like this person is going to deal with my honesty if I give it or not? And why do you want to know it? Oh, I'm just interested. Oh, well, I'm not going to give it to you. I really want to know. Okay, well, I trust you and maybe I'll give it. So it's testing the waters. Interesting. I love that. Thank you. Someone else. How do you deflect when you don't want to answer it? What's your go-to method? Next to you here.
I ask questions. So the spotlight moves from me to the other person.
Yeah. And how does that work?
I'll say, well, what do you actually think? I'm unsure myself, but I'd be interested to see what you think.
Look, that is a fantastic way of getting out of it too, because, like I said, if I was to ask you, what do you fear? And you say,
I'm not
sure. What would you say you fear? And if I said, spiders, you go, right, we're going easy ones, you know. All right, I'll give you a nice easy one. But if I say, I feel, dying alone like my dad and being completely humble, or something like that, you might go, oh shit, now I can't go with spiders now. It's very, you have to match it. But it's also, it's testing the water. It's working out how deep do I go or not. Okay, great, thank you. One other one, something a bit different. What's another way that you guys get out of it if you don't want to answer something? Silence is one. I know that one works. Anything else? Anything a bit different? Humour. Yeah, we'll bring you the mic. Does it work for you? Who said humour?
I've just been dobbed in. Thanks, Celia. I said humour, and because it lightens the mood, but then people tend to get distracted and you never get back to what the original uncomfortable question was.
So I'm assuming you're funny. Humour only works if you're funny.
Not necessarily. Okay. Look, but I give it a go.
Humour's very powerful, and I've definitely interviewed people on stage before, and I've asked something where I'm hoping the person would give something real, and they've deflected with humour, and the whole room's crack up in laughter. Well, I was like, they're just deflecting, they're getting out of it. Everyone else has been honest, and you've deflected with humour. So it actually is, it's dangerous to say, no, ignore your joke. You can put the whole room offside. I want something real out of you. So it's a very powerful tool, humour, because you can get the mob involved, particularly if you're funny. All right. Now, why I'm telling you this, why I'm asking you this is not so you can start calling people out when you start suspecting they're deflecting in your presence, right? But if you can start identifying when you're deflecting in your own life, and you start noticing it in yourself all the time. Oh my God, right now I'm feeling uncomfortable. I'm doing this little technique to get out of it. If you start noticing in yourself, you'll start noticing in others. And when you start noticing in others, what it's telling you is that the person is uncomfortable in your presence right now and comfortable with the question and the line of question you're asking. So your job in that moment is to work out, how do I get this person to feel comfortable again so they can relax and speak honestly? And that's what I'm doing in an interview. The barrier will come up and I'm like, oh my God, there's something that's twigged them there and they feel uncomfortable. What can I do to help them relax again? How can I change the way I'm asking this question? How can I go about it in a different way so they feel comfortable again in my presence and relax and speak openly and honestly? So to work through the interview process today, I thought it'd be fun to create a fictionalized version of my show called You Can't Ask That. Insurance professionals. Now, I realise it's a very broad term, but let's work with it. Where you guys are all going to be my producers on the show, which is great because hopefully this is a group of people that you know well, probably know better than me anyway. There's two parts to the interview, and this is how I work every single time on every single show I work on with every single person I speak to. There's the plan, so all the work that happens before a single question is asked, and then there's the actual interview itself. I want to focus in on one part of the plan today, and that's the question itself. What do you want to ask? If I was to create an episode of my show on insurance professionals, what would I want to ask? What are the questions you typically couldn't ask someone in this room? So on You Can't Ask That, when we write questions, when we come up with questions, we come up with questions we are actually interested in wanting to know the answer to. Sounds like an obvious thing to say, to ask questions that you're genuinely interested in wanting to know what the answer is, but I'm sure you've experienced this in your own life. A lot of people ask questions, but they don't really care what your answer is. They're asking a question to be polite, or they feel like they should, right? We only ask questions where we genuinely want to know the answer. I learnt this the hard way, interviewing centenarians, 100-year-olds. I spent too long with these ones on the warm-up questions, the ones that didn't really matter, the ones that we were going to cut in the edit. By the time I actually got to the really good stuff in the interview, they started falling asleep in the chair. So I really learned to get to the good stuff, to ask the questions that matter. So what do you want to ask? What's a question that you typically wouldn't ask someone in this room, an insurance professional, to understand who they are and how they tick, right? And in a moment, you're going to get a chance to brainstorm questions. When you brainstorm questions, what I want you to do is I want you to come up with a question that's a little bit challenging or confronting to answer, right? Or maybe a question that's illuminating, where you might learn something about someone in this room that you otherwise wouldn't. Or a question that you might normally feel a bit stupid or awkward to ask. You know, that's the Louis Theroux method. Ask questions that otherwise you might look stupid to ask, but forget that, I'm going to ask it anyway. What's a good question I hear you ask? Well, I'd say something that's short and to the point. Don't ask a question with a giant long story at the beginning, or that's full of qualifiers, or begins with a huge compliment before you get to the question. Just ask the question. And I can't reiterate this enough. Ask a question you genuinely want to know the answer to, that you're interested to know what the answer is. So, what I want you to do is, I want you to, here's some examples I came up. So to give you an idea, I don't want you to come up with questions like, what do you dislike about your boss, right? That's not the sort of question I'm going for here. I want you to come up with questions that understand how the people in this room think, that unpacks them. So it could be something like, how do you cope when you become emotionally drained, right? I'm sure you do work in your life or outside of work where you get emotionally drained. How do you cope with that? Maybe something like, what have you sacrificed in your personal life for your work? I know that a lot of people sacrifice stuff, and is it worth it or not? Or something as simple as what motivates you to get up in the morning, right? Come up with a question that you typically wouldn't ask someone in this room, that's a bit challenging and confronting to answer, that's illuminating, or you normally feel stupid or awkward to ask. So again, turn to the person next to you. You're going to have 2 minutes. Again, for those at home, just get a piece of paper and jot it down. For those who are working with groups, turn to the person next to you. You're going to have 2 minutes, and I want you to come up with at least a question each that you typically wouldn't ask someone in this room about who they are to understand how they tick. Make sense? All right. Off you go. You got paper and pen there. Don't write on the little cards yet. Don't write on the little cards yet. 1 question each. Time's up. Time's up. How did you find that? Easy, hard? Hard, yeah. Sometimes it's hard to sort of to get past, what do I actually really want to know? It's all right. Because the next part of the process of designing a question is to test the question out to see if it's any good. So how do you test a question to see if it's any good? The best way to test a question that I've found, and this is why I practice it all my time myself, is to test the question on yourself and answer out loud to hear what comes out of your own mouth. Now, it's important to do it out of your own mouth, not in your head. It's very easy to answer a question in your head. You sort of go, oh, I'd say that. But when it comes out of your own mouth, you have to realize how much of a risk it is to actually say this answer or not, or how easy or not. So when you test a question on yourself and you answer out loud, what will happen is a couple of things. First of all, you'll find out, can you even answer the question? Sometimes a question looks fantastic on paper. When you got to answer it, it's really hard to come up with something. Other questions you have, coming up with an answer is simple and you can just talk and talk and talk and talk, right? Secondly, does your question get to something interesting? Is your answer a bit boring, right? What's your biggest regret, right? Sounds like a good question, but do you know how 90% of people answer that question? I have no regrets. Everything I've done has made me who I am today. It's a very boring answer, right? It's good territory, regrets, but it doesn't work. That question in the way it's written doesn't work. Thirdly, does your question get to something personal or does it get to something theoretical? People love hiding behind showing you how smart they are, right? Or other people freak out about looking stupid by getting the question wrong. Thing is, if you go personal, they can never be wrong. And for me, it's far more interesting territory than testing your knowledge. I can Google that stuff, but I can't hear what your personal experience is like. Now, when you're testing the question out loud, you might need to adjust it or change it in a way so it makes more sense. So what's your biggest regret might be, what's something you do over again if you had the chance? See how it's getting to the same thing, but it's a much easier question to answer. The other important thing about testing the question on yourself is, for a very short instance, you get to feel what it feels like to be in that hot seat being interviewed. Because, I have a rule for my own work that I won't ask a question of anyone that I haven't answered myself, because how can I expect someone to answer something, particularly on television, that I haven't even got the courage to answer sitting at my own desk? So what I want you to do is turn back to the person next to you, test your question out loud and adjust or eliminate it, and then I want you to come up with your best question and then write it on that bit of card, because afterwards I'm going to collect a few questions from the room, all right, that I'm going to use as a basis of an interview I'm going to do right up the front here. Okay? So you got 2 minutes. Test your question out loud. Collect. Okay, time's up. Time's up. So I'd love to collect a few questions from the room. Who's I'm going to collect probably 4 or 5 questions. Who's got a question for me? Who wants to start us off here? All right. No, you have to read it out for me. Yeah, stand up for me and read it. Stand up and read it out. That's all right.
I thought you were going to read it out too. Okay, here we go. I said to Roz, or anyone else in this room, Have you ever felt like you were discriminated against in a meeting, and how did you deal with it?
All right, so have you ever been discriminated against in a meeting? Meeting more so than just work in general?
Yeah, like a work meeting. So whether
Okay.
you're in an internal or an external work meeting.
And why do you think this is a good one to ask? Just why did you come up with
Because
this?
I think sometimes you can be put in scenarios where you can deal with something like that, and other times you're in scenarios that you can't. So with Roz, for example, I was asking...
So wait a sec, just how did you answer it when you answered this question yourself, when you tested it out
Well,
loud?
I was saying probably similar to probably what Roz was going to say, insofar as there are scenarios where I would deal with it differently depending on the environment.
So just what's the question again for me?
Have you ever felt like you were discriminated against in a meeting, and how did you deal with it?
So have you been discriminated against in a meeting?
Yes.
So, and what was that like?
Well, it doesn't make you feel very nice. So I was saying that if you're in an external meeting with perhaps a client or something like that, you would be less inclined to react versus a meeting that maybe was internal or with people that you knew better. You would probably be more likely to address it.
And did you address it rather than the hypothetical? What did you actually do when you were discriminated against that particular time?
No, I didn't react to it because it was an external client scenario.
So how did you feel about it afterwards? What did you do?
Well, I guess I felt disappointed in myself for not, probably more disappointed with myself in the way that I felt afterwards.
What do you mean by that?
I like your line of questioning. He's got me right.
I'm just trying to understand the question, yeah.
Well, I think there are scenarios, like if you're in a professional environment, you can't always act how you might want to act in your real life. But I think it's sad to walk away from a scenario where you don't feel like you were treated the way that you would expect to be treated.
Look, I'm sorry for quizzing you so much so, but give her a clap. That was really well done. It's an interesting question because actually I have a lot of actual follow-up questions. I feel like I was just scratching the surface of where you could go with that question. And there's always, it's a good sign if a question has lots of different angles. Go, how come you're laughing? It's nothing to do with... Okay. Sorry, I just want to make sure that you weren't. Who else has got a question for me? Yeah.
This was an excellent collaboration, by the way.
Okay, great.
Right here. What would your 5-year-old self think of you working in insurance?
What would your 5-year-old self think of you working in insurance? All right, how did you answer this question?
I don't actually work in insurance.
Okay. Well, I just turn. What would your 5-year-old self think of the way you've turned out?
I think she'd be a little bit disappointed I'm not having more fun. I think I'm probably a little bit serious for my 5-year-old self.
How do you? What do you think about that?
I kind of go to theoretical, which is life means sometimes you have to be serious. But I think I could probably squeeze a bit more fun to what I do.
Fantastic. Love it. Love it. Give her a clap. Fantastic question. Who else? I want to collect a couple more. Who else has got a question for me? Yeah. We'll bring you a mic just so the people who are watching on the video can.
Did you have to change your personality to be successful in your career?
Great question. So how did you answer this question when you tested her?
Yeah, a little. Like I feel like I'm a bit.
Just talking to the mic for me there, yeah.
Yeah, I guess a little. Like I don't know. People who know me will probably think, "Well, I'm a bit shy," so it kind of forces me to be a bit more outgoing than I normally would be. So yeah.
So do you think that the forced change has been a good thing or not a good thing? How do you?
I think it's been a good thing. I like being outgoing, but there's sometimes when you're just like, I don't think I can people enough. I think I've peopled enough today, so I think everyone probably thinks that anyway. But yeah.
Fantastic question. I love it. Well done. Give her a clap too. A couple more. Just two more questions. Something a bit different. Over here, yeah.
Sorry, mine's also about meetings. It's how do you cope with the monotony of repetitive meetings, which you get in the insurance industry, as we all know.
So what's your coping mechanism? How did you answer this?
I think it depends whether it's your meeting or a meeting that you have to be in. And so how do you, I guess, call out that it has become repetitive, and can you change that up with changing the format or the timing or the content, or do you need to have the meeting and, those sorts of things?
It's interesting, this question, because it almost, if you went slightly bigger, is how do you challenge someone that needs to be challenged in a way? Like, how do you call out a meeting that's not working, but how do you challenge someone that you feel like needs to be challenged? If I was to sort of turn it into a question about that, how do you do that?
I think it's depending on the power position of the room, and trying to, I guess, balance what you're trying to achieve. And often I just try and get them to understand that actually they want something different. So if it's how do you get them, or how do you trigger to get the end result?
Inception,
you know what I mean?
A little bit. Yeah. I love it. Fantastic question. Thank you. One last question I'd love to collect. One more, just a little bit. Yeah, down the front here. God, this aisle here is the A+ students here. Yeah. What's your question?
It's specific to claims, but how do you recognise when you're taking on a lot of people's trauma vicariously, when you're burnt out, when you've reached your threshold?
And look, it's for claim. I suppose you've designed it for claims, but I think that I'm sure all of us in here have felt burnout at some point in time, or have taken too much on, and you feel overwhelmed, or whatever it happens to be. How do you recognise when you're? So essentially, it's how do you recognise when you're burnt out?
I think that's the first question, but the follow-up question would be, and how do you ask for help?
So how did you answer this? Have you experienced burnout before in your life?
Multiple times.
And how do you recognise it? Have you got better at recognising it?
I think with experience, yes, there's the physical signs, but I think my issue is letting people know that I've reached that stage, and my withdrawal is not that I don't care, but that I've reached a limit. But I'm still there for them.
And so have you got better at coping with the burnout? Yeah, right.
Much better this year.
What's your tip to people about coping with burnout?
I think perhaps recognizing the stress signals in your body as just as an observation, and then questioning it. What happened today? What were the conversations that I had that triggered? What was the external stressor? Just identifying it first.
Amazing. Thank you. Hey, can you give everyone an applause for coming up with all those questions? I really appreciate it. What I'm going to do now is what I call a hot seat demonstration, and in a moment I'm going to invite someone to come up here to do a demonstration interview, I suppose. And I think it's really important to experience being in the hot seat from time to time, because I think particularly as you go up the rungs, and I've noticed in my own life as I've gone further up the scale of authority in my own workplace, I become the question asker, and I forget what it's like to be on the other side, answering those questions, going into the office, having to feel the heat of that. And when anyone comes to work with me, particularly new producers, I set up my set and we put the chair in place, and I say, hey, I want you to sit in the seat. I want you to, be interviewed. And I'll ask them a couple of questions, and often they'll try and deflect with a jokey answer or give something frivolous. And I say, no, I want you to answer it properly. I want you to feel what it feels like to experience answering it, so that when you start calling people up to come on the show, in a very small way, you can empathise with what you're about to ask them to do. So, having said all that, I'd like to invite one person who'd like the experience of coming up and being interviewed. Just while we're working that out, can I just grab those? I'm just so you know, I'm going to use 2 questions from the room and 1 of my own. So I'm not going to go through every single one of these. this, everyone? See these all? Yeah. All right. Okay, so how are we going? We got anyone? All right, come on down. Good man. All right. So, what's your name? Alex. Thanks for doing it. Come on up. So, tell me, I know there was a big, long silence in here, but you put your hand up and you put it up nice and strong. Why ultimately did you jump up?
I like talking about myself.
Mate,
Deflection. Oh, God.
people love talking about themselves. It's very true. So how it's going to work is this. You've got 3 questions there. 2 are from the room, 1's my own. It's the same warm-up question I use every single time with every single interview that I do. Your job when we get started is just to pick up the question, read out the question, and answer the question. I'll ask a couple of follow-up questions, and I'll say, let's go to the next one. It's a demonstration, so I won't go as deep and all down the garden path like I might on a TV show. And then I'll move on to the next one. Answer as honestly as you feel comfortable.
Okay.
All right. Any questions for me?
No.
All right, let's go.
What do people get wrong about me? I think that I can come across as very opinionated, so people can think I'm very opinionated, when I'm actually very open to other people's opinion. And what I'm doing is I'm very comfortable giving my opinion, but I'm asking because I want to know their opinion and I want to understand the situation. I want to understand the issue. But I think because I'm very comfortable putting my opinion across, people think that I have a very clear opinion. I don't want to change my mind. That's the only thing, I think that's the only thing I want to do. When actually it's the opposite. I'm very open to having my opinion changed.
And how do you know that people feel this way about you?
Because I've been told.
Right. What's it like being told that when, as you said, it's the complete opposite? You're actually sort of interested. What's it like hearing that feedback?
Like you said, people want to be understood, but people also don't like being misunderstood. So yeah, it can be disappointing.
What's it like when people actually find out that, no, I'm actually open to have my opinion changed? Did you just have to...
Yeah, good. You know. When I think, it feels good when people get to know you better, right, and understand you better.
And do you find that, in your private life it's more that way, or in your work life that you're misunderstood, or is it sort of across the board? Where does it seem this misunderstanding tend to happen more than others?
I think probably more in professional life, because you tend to get less time with a broader range of people. Like in your personal life, generally speaking, you'll be having deeper relationships with a smaller number of people, so there's more of an opportunity to, get your real self across, maybe.
Awesome, great start. Let's go to the next question. Very small writing, I know, in some of these.
Did you have to change your personality to be successful in your career? I.e., if a person is aggressive at work versus being laid back. It was, when the question was asked earlier, my first thought was, like you said, positive change or negative change, right? Because you could interpret that as having to change yourself is a negative versus a positive because it's a learning experience. And I would say I feel about it positively. So I think I have changed professionally, but I would view it as a positive because of wanting to learn about myself and wanting to be better understood.
What's been a positive change? How have you changed in a positive way?
Being more prepared to listen to people, possibly related to the opinionated one. I think to value a broader range of opinion, right? To value, to not just value, but to seek a broader range of opinion. I've been shown, I've been working for 25 years. I've been shown so many times over 25 years that I'm wrong, and I have a lot of evidence to base a desire to have a broader range of opinion in the room on.
Are you proud of the changes that you've made? I think sometimes we don't give ourselves a pat on the back for actually having changed.
Yeah, I am, I think, yeah. I'm further to go, but yes, so far.
Let's go to our final question. You're doing an awesome job.
Do I get a prize?
You get a big clap.
What would your 5-year-old self think of you working in insurance? Well, I don't think they'd have much of an opinion because they wouldn't have known what insurance was. So,
Yeah. What would your 5-year-old self think of you, do you think? How you've turned out?
I think broadly they'd be pretty comfortable with the 50-year-old me as opposed to the 5-year-old me. I think I've done a reasonable job of like wanting to learn and wanting to change and wanting to, understand myself, but also staying true to the things that I believe in and the things that I think are important. I feel like I've changed as opposed to compromised. If that makes sense. So, yeah, I think they'd be okay with me.
What do you reckon what did your young version of yourself want you to be, you think?
The only thing I can ever remember wanting to be, and it was older than 5, was a chef. And then I realized I'm a horrible cook. So I went out the window.
That's everything. Well done. Give him a clap.
Thank you.
Very nice. Well done. All right. So, that was very nice. Well done. And I know there was a bit of silence to getting up here, but there's always someone who will come up, and I thought you did a magnificent job of traversing those questions. So now I want to talk about the interview itself for the final section. And when someone comes to see me to be interviewed, I not only want them to be themselves, but I want them to shine. I want them to be great. And I really do whatever I can to help make that happen. So I've broken the interview down into 4 parts. How to help someone feel comfortable quickly, reading them in the moment, some techniques to ask better questions, and then how to close the interaction positively so the person walks away feeling good. So how do you help someone feel comfortable quickly? Helps someone feel comfortable quickly if they trust you. And if they trust you, they're more likely to drop this facade that we all carry around and be themselves. It doesn't matter who you are, you're nervous coming into an interview. Whether you're someone who's never done it before or you're the Prime Minister, everyone wants to do a good job. No one wants to be a shit interviewee. So my job is to help them be good, to do a really good job. So how do I do it? The first thing I'd say is I switch on. From the moment that person walks through the door to be interviewed, there's no one more important to me in my life than that person I'm about to interview. So not some issue at my desk, not some drama that's going on at home, definitely not my mobile phone. I sort of think about it this way. I'm in love with this person in the moment. I want them to be great. I want them to do a good job. And if you ask questions with love, people can really feel that. Now, being on doesn't mean you're being fake. If you want this person to be real, then you also need to be real. And every single person that I speak to deserves this. Whether it's the first person I speak to that day and I'm fresh, or it's the 10th person and I'm exhausted and I've caught a plane and all this other stuff's happened on that day. All this person knows is they're about to come in and share something really honest with me, and I owe it to them to be on. The second thing I do is, as quickly as I can, I try and find some common ground. I try and find a small connection. This helps break the ice, but it also shows that you've got something in common, something very small in common with this person, even if it's only on a very small level. The one we all do, the most obvious one, is discuss the weather. But I encourage you to look for something more personal, more nuanced when you meet someone. Then I'm very transparent and professional, right? There's no tricks. I'm not trying to set anyone up or trick them. People don't want to look stupid or make mistakes, so I'm very clear about how this whole thing's going to work to alleviate those natural doubts that they have coming in. So this is where you sit, this is where I sit, this is where the microphones are. If you say something you don't want to include it on tape, we won't include it, let us know, blah, 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 right? I'm also very prepared. People will trust the process if they feel like they're in the hands of a professional. If they're walking through the door and I'm madly writing my questions and I'm unorganised, the first thing they're going to think is, why would I trust my story with this joker? They're not even prepared. This is a picture of my set, and as you can see, it's a pretty intimidating space to walk into if you've never been interviewed before, which is 90% of the people I speak to. So I have to work really hard when they walk through the door to help alleviate that natural anxiety that people have when they come in. All right, how to read or connect with people in the moment. suppose one of my best skills is being able to talk to anyone and ultimately get anyone to open up. To be able to connect with someone in the moment, you need to be able to get on their level. And we all do this naturally. You talk to your grandma in a different way you might talk to a teenager. You know, we adjust, but we're still ourselves. So you need to be able to get on their level. And if you can get on their level, you can empathise with them and their experience. This word empathy is a word we all know. We probably all think we do, right? But I see a lot of people, particularly in my industry, go through the motions to sound empathetic, but they're not truly trying to understand what it's like to stand in someone's shoes. So we did an episode of our show on cheaters. People have cheated on their romantic partner. And even my producers struggle with this. We're like, we can't do an episode on cheaters. They were happy to do an episode on murderers, but cheaters, no fucking way, right? And after this episode went to air, there was a whole lot of online chatter. And someone left the comment, I could normally empathise with people on this show, but I can't empathise with these people. And I had this gut reaction to it. I was like, what you're basically saying is, I couldn't feel sorry for people on this show normally, but I can't feel sorry for these people. I can sympathise, but I can't sympathise, blah, blah, blah. Because, you know, like, you can't empathise with the experience of making a big mistake, because that's ultimately what all these people did. They made a big mistake. Or you can't empathise with the experience of hurting someone you love. I've hurt someone I love. I know what that feels like. Right? You can't empathise with the experience of doing something stupid when you're drunk, because some of the people had done something stupid drunk. I've done that. Or you can't empathise with the experience of following your heart, because I've followed my heart before. I know what that feels like. And some of these people who cheated, it ultimately was for the best. There's many ways to empathise with the experience of cheating without agreeing with it. Empathy is not about agreeing with a person or compassion or sympathy. It's about understanding how they see the world and how they think. And empathising with someone for an entire interaction takes energy and effort, particularly if they're saying things that you don't agree with. So what I'd say to you is when someone starts talking, actually genuinely listen and give a shit, right? It's also called active listening. But it's not just hearing the words they say, but it's taking in their body language and their emotive cues. And it's acknowledging what they're saying is hitting home. So it's nodding, it's laughing to their jokes, it's understanding, it's letting them know that you hear them and you get them. And this is really refreshing for people, that you really, really listen, as opposed to normal life where people are just waiting for their chance to jump in with their own thought or their own solution or their next story, and they're just staring at you blankly. They're not really giving you any feedback that they hear you. Then use the wealth of your own experience to transport into their shoes. So I'm constantly trying to find ways in which I've experienced in my own life a certain feeling or experience this person's talking about. So it could be fear, it could be judgment, it could be joy, it could be loneliness. Right? Sure, I haven't cheated on my partner, but I can find ways to identify with that feeling or that experience they're talking about and use that to help guide my question asking to understand what their experience is like. But you also need to be aware of your own biases, not bring your biases to your question asking. This is not about feeling sorry for them or angry for them or sorry for them. It's about understanding them, right? So rather than ask this person, how could you do that to someone that you love? Ask, what was it like to hurt the person that you love? Tell me what that experience was like. Teach me about that. You see the difference between those two questions? It's the same, getting to the same place, but one's coming from a place of judgment, one's coming from a place of trying to understand. Now, I know I've only got a few minutes left, but I'm going to show you a couple of minutes of an uncut clip of someone I interviewed in the street. And why I want to show you this is that you normally in media see the finished product. You don't often get to see the uncut footage. So I'm going to show you 2 minutes of an interview. And this is someone I met in the street, and I asked this question. He was just walking past me in the street for a program I made for the ABC. And I was asking all the people that walked past me the same big questions about life, big universal questions anyone can answer. So he doesn't know what the questions are. And I'm going to show you the first 30 seconds when I build some rapport, and then I cut to the second question after he's warmed up. As you're watching it, I just want you to think about what questions I ask, how I empathise, but also think about what questions you would ask if you're in the same situation, because we all have our own instincts about where we'd go. All right.
No. Oh, well, I ate chicken that was 6 months off, so I'm not feeling the best.
See, that's a good lesson. Everyone freaks out chicken's 1 day old, can't eat it. You ate it 6 months off.
Oh, well, I ate it at 3.5 years that was out of date, and that didn't make me sick. So doing it after being only 6 months, I thought I'd be fine, but no.
You ready? When did you lose your innocence?
Oh,
And what I mean by, do you know what I mean by that?
yeah. Probably when I was around 8.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like my mum and her boyfriend at the time were always constantly fighting. So like I'd get in between houses. I ended up started drinking and doing drugs that I'd find, and then yeah, until like 2 years ago I was homeless, living in like around the Ipswich Mall, and so yeah. And now and then I found a friend that I had a baby with, and now I've got this beautiful 11-month-old daughter. It's absolutely perfect, and I've got a job at the moment, but the chicken made me feel ill, so.
Yeah. So at 8 years old, you were moving around.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
Far out. Can you remember that time well? Like, what did you learn at the time? What did you you realise about the world? You know, because up till then, maybe you're like, oh, stuff's cool, ride around on your bike or whatever it was. What did you sort of realise about the world at 8?
Probably everyone lies. Everyone lies. Yeah. It's probably the best thing I learned out of it. Just don't believe anyone.
So, who do you still talk to from those days?
I keep in contact with my mother, like, yeah, only my mother. Other than that, I just hang around. I used to hang around in here. Yeah.
So what was it like living here in this, in the street, trying to work all that stuff out on your own as a teenager? Because that's not many kids, experiences. Like, what was that actually like?
Well, around Ipswich, like, there have been a couple of teenagers are homeless around here, so it was easier than probably a lot of other places to live, I'm sure, homelessly. And
Tell me, how the hell did you get out of it all? You seem like you're doing pretty good now.
Yeah, the only reason I got out of it was because my friend Melissa actually took me back to her place, and I stayed there for 3 months. We saved enough money for bond and got a unit of our own, and have held it for 2 years now successfully. So,
How do you feel about all that?
oh, I'm so proud, and I've got the most beautiful daughter I love spending time with, and yeah, I'd sooner die than let anything like that happen to my daughter, because it's a crap life.
So just quickly, here's a guy who seconds ago is joking about chicken. Yet if you create an environment where he feels comfortable, how quickly he will open up and tell you about what's going on. And as you were saying before, people like talking about themselves. If you create an environment where they feel comfortable, they'll talk about themselves. And there were so many hooks he gave there about where we could go and living in the Ipswich Mall. But I think what was really important there was that, I only had 10 minutes with this guy in the street. So we often get caught up in the story and asking about all the details and whatever, but being aware of time and knowing that there was some wisdom, I was so interested to know, didn't seem like to me that he was doing too badly at that point in time, and understanding how he'd moved through it. And I don't know about for you, but for me, that's the favourite part, is hearing about the win, hearing how he'd got through it and how he had changed, and moving out of the story and actually hearing some wisdom and how he'd moved on. So what I want to do from here is just go through some techniques. I know we're only a few minutes left. Some techniques to ask better questions. Planning versus in the moment. So when I go into an interview, I go in with a plan, a series of pre-written questions. On You Can't Ask That, I had 10 well-crafted, short, sharp questions. But everything else in the interview happens in the moment, in the questions that arise from what my interviewee says. And for me, this is so exciting because it can go in all directions. This is where my own curiosity and seeking to understand happens. The trick is balancing these two. Not being so rigid with your questions, feeling like you have to ask every single question of someone because you went to all this effort of coming up with them on a bit of paper, but not going so rogue with your follow-up questions that what you're trying to achieve with your interaction goes out the window. So have the courage in the moment to follow your gut and go down the garden path a bit, but have a plan to go back to keep you on track. Curiosity versus interrogation. Like I said earlier, I interview with love. I'm on the side of the person I'm speaking to. I'm looking for ways to be positive. I'm not there to interrogate this person or get to the bottom of something or crucify them. So be aware of the weight of the question you're asking and what it takes to answer it. Even the most simple question like, how are you, is a particularly challenging question to answer really truthfully and honestly to a friend or to a colleague. And how do most people answer that question? Oh, I'm fine, thanks, and how are you? Right? They don't necessarily feel from you that they can go there. The thing about curiosity is that it's the antidote to judgment. The more you're curious, the less judgmental you are. And the more curious you are, the better listener you are, because you have to listen to what they say to be more curious, to ask more questions. Which leads to my next point, shut up and listen. Our normal mode is to jump in, but if you shut up and listen, then people will elaborate. They'll tell you things, they'll fill in the gaps. They'll say things they wouldn't have if you jumped in with your own thought. And the more you're silent, the more they'll keep telling you things. But being comfortable with silence takes practice. Finally, I'd say don't be afraid to be playful. I think people think if you're having a serious dialogue, there can be no humour. But that's not true. People deal with life with humour. And even my most serious topic, suicide attempt survivors, people who had survived the Port Arthur massacre, they had this way of describing their experience in both heartache but also humour, because that's how they'd processed it. And almost giving someone permission to express both of those things is really important. The final thing I want to talk about is how to close the interaction positively. So when you get someone to speak honestly and openly, authentically, you need to be aware of how you close it out. You don't want to ask some big question and be like, oh, shit, sorry, I didn't realise the meeting's over. We'll, yeah, okay, good on you. We'll catch up next time. You know, and this final step really will help forge your reputation as someone that you can have these dialogues with, right? So what I'd say to you is plan how you finish. A good way is to have a question about learning or growth or wisdom, something that changes the energy, brings it up. So after that giant story you've just told me, what did you learn about yourself? How did it change you for the better? This gives that person a chance to reflect on what they've just told you and give you the wisdom of their experience. And people are rarely asked about their own wisdoms. And often this is where little epiphanies happen, things they hadn't thought about previously. Then acknowledge the effort. Acknowledge the effort it takes to sit there, answer questions, and be honest. Thank them. Tell them well done. You know, it's not tricky stuff, this. Feedback's something that resonated with you. Doesn't matter how you do it, as long as it's honest. Then be clear about the next steps. People want to feel like what they just did was not a mistake and they're going to get looked after once they leave the room. Right? So be very clear about what's going to happen next. Hey, I'm going to share that with so-and-so. It doesn't leave us. Let's catch up in 7 days and pick it up from there. But wrapping it up in a neat bow so that person walks away feeling good, like they're not going to be taken advantage of. They're going to be looked after. And finally, you need to be consistent. You can't do it one day and then the next day you don't do it. And my entire reputation is based on me doing this consistently and every single time. And once you have a reputation for doing it consistently, then people will just come in and they will talk and they'll trust you and they'll open up. All right. Like any technique, these skills take practice. So when you're in interactions in your own life, be aware of what you do, what questions you ask, how you listen. Line up a short, sharp interview with someone who will play along. In a moment, you're going to have drinks, right? Grab someone and ask, what do people get wrong about you? It's a fantastic question. Experience being on both seats. Experience just answering and having the other person ask questions based off what you're saying, not interrupting with their own story, and vice versa. Interview your parents, if you can. The questions you can't ask. Come up with 5. I did it with my parents. My dad's an old Kentucky tour guide, and if you're from that generation, yeah, there's things I can't unlearn, but that's all part of the process, right? Interview your parents. The questions you can't ask. I promise you, it's a good one. But if you practice asking the hard questions and you look to truly understand people, you will have deeper and more meaningful communication, I promise you. This is my details. If you want to contact me and send me a question, I'm happy to answer questions. Links to my show and all that. I have a little newsletter I write about the interview and communication. So if it's up your alley, go for it. But otherwise, thank you very much. Lovely talking to you, and thanks for having me part of your festival. And see you everyone at home. No problem.
Ladies and gentlemen, well, Kirk did mention drinks, so I won't keep you very long at all. My name's Peter Murdoch. I'm one of the principals at Barry Nilsson Lawyers, actually from the Brisbane office. You did mention AFL before, big game in Melbourne this weekend. You know who I'm supporting. That was fantastic, Kirk. Really enjoyed that. Very insightful. Have you ever been asked whether you wish to train as a barrister or anything like that?
No.
Some pretty solid cross-examination going on there. Really enjoyed it. You're a great talent. I've certainly learned a lot out of the presentation. And in particular at the beginning, the bit about how to deflect. And certainly in Queensland at least, there's an election coming up in a month's time. So we're getting a lot of that from our politicians. They don't know how to answer a question. Very interactive too. And congratulations to the gentleman who was up here in the hot seat. That took a lot of courage. Well done, mate. I think we all walk away today with some useful techniques to break down barriers to inclusive conversations. It helps us better understand the unique perspective of all the individuals we work with, and everyone's certainly very different. We know that inclusion and diversity stimulate strategic thinking, creativity, and collaboration, allowing us to see new perspectives, find solutions to complex problems, and nurture growth. Together with BMS, thank you, Andrew, and Ayla, Sarah, thank you for coming along as the Queensland chapter representative. Barry Nilsson's very proud to bring you this insightful and practical session as part of this year's Dive-In Festival. It's an important initiative for us because diversity and inclusion are core to our firm values and culture and are actively championed through our D&I program, BN included. So on behalf of our event partners, thank you all for attending this particular event as part of the Dive-In Festival, now of course in its 10th year. As Kirk said, stay with us for a drink and continue those discussions, a little bit more role playing perhaps. Enjoy the evening and thanks again, Kirk. It was impressive.